What has Ralph dug up now?
Who is luring the local kids into the woods?
And what is Angel Blake up to now?
These and other questions will be answered in this week's
It's Frenzy Frights.
Welcome to Frenzy Frights, a horror movie review show. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And we are your hosts.
On Frenzy Frights, we are going to talk about horror movies, monster movies, creature features, and spook shows of all sorts. We love these movies, even if sometimes they fall short. We will share our love for these films, but also point out issues in a genre-appropriate way.
Chris, what movie are we talking about today?
Thanks, Prof. We are looking at The Blood on Satan's Claw. This was directed by Piers Haggard. It was written by Robert Wynne Simmons and Piers Haggard. For our cast, we have Patrick Wymark as the judge, Linda Hayden as Angel Blake, Barry Andrews as Ralph Gower, Michelle Daughtris as Margaret, Wendy Padbury as Kathy Vespers, Anthony Ainley as Reverend Fallowfield, Charlotte Mitchell as Ellen, Tamara Ustinov as Rosalind Barton, Simon Williams as Peter Edmonton, James Hayter as Squire Middleton, Howard Gorney played the Doctor, Avis Landon played Isabel Bannum, Robin Davies was Mark Vespers, and Godfrey James was Angel's father. The cinematography was done by Dick Bush. Music was done by Mark Wilkinson. And for the production companies, we had Tygon Bergen Films Production and Chilton Film and Television Enterprises. This was distributed by Tygon Productions. The release date on this first appeared on January 17th, 1971 in Birmingham, and it was followed up by another release in London on July 16th of 1971. This had a running time of just 93 minutes. Gerry, can you give us a brief synopsis of the movie? And then we're going to follow up with our own thoughts.
You betcha. A couple of alerts. First off, we have a spoiler alert. I'm about to spoil the whole movie. And also some trigger alerts for sexual assault and violence and generally weaponized sexuality. So beware. So it is sometime in the early 18th century England. Ralph Gower is plowing a field and overturns the remains of a creature with deformed-looking features. It has what looks to be a seeing eyeball in the nasty-looking skull. Ralph runs quick like a bunny to the lady of the property who owns the nearby farmhouse, Mistress Bannum. She has a visitor. We only hear his name as the judge. Bannum is upset hearing Ralph's story, and to placate her, the judge reluctantly agrees to take a look. But when they get to the field, the remains are gone. Where is this face of a fiend, this deformed anatomy? Peter Bannum, who apparently uses John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin's hairstylist, is coming to visit his aunt, Mistress Bannum, and is bringing his new fiancée, Rosalind Barton, a lowly farmer's daughter. Mistress Bannum does not receive the news of the wedding tomorrow very well at all. And after a night of being terrible at playing cards, Rosalind tells them she must sleep over the house, having been presumably kicked out of her own house for cavorting with Peter. Mistress Bannum has the attic sort of cleaned up for her. Peter and Rosalind agree to secretly meet at 11 p.m., and he leaves Rosalind alone in the attic room. While she relaxes, Rosalind hears a terrible knocking on the floorboards. There's something down there trying to get up. She starts to scream. Peter, the judge, and Mistress Bannum hear the screaming, yelling, and basically the full commotion from the attic room and try to get in. Peter breaks down the door and sees that Rosalind has gone mad. She's screaming in terror. Mistress Bannum goes to the attic to smack some sense into her, but somehow gets a vicious scratch across her face. The Jacobite judge has the door nailed shut so Rosalind can't escape, and they arrange for the bedlam to come get her. When the man arrives to take her away, she gives Peter a frighteningly evil smile, and he sees that her hand now has claws. Dang. Mistress Bannum is having a weird reaction to that face scratch. The doctor bleeds her for good measure, But when she's alone, she gets up from her sickbed and disappears into the woods. There's hunting and searching for her, but to no avail. Angel Blake and her friends are playing around in the field that Ralph previously found the deformed anatomy. Angel finds something in the dirt and runs off with her friends who are interested in what she found. We meet Reverend Fallowfield, who looks a little bit like Lord Farquhar from Shrek. But he is the schoolmaster in the town and is trying to teach the local kids their Bible. But Angel Blake is sharing her finds with the kids in the back row. She's found pieces of bone and stuff from that deformed anatomy, presumably. She has the pieces in a bag, which she's passing around the class. Kathy looks and cries out in horror, which alerts Fallowfield to the shenanigans. The kids successfully keep the parts from him. Angel is using the fascination with these pieces and parts to basically start a demon sex cult in the woods. Peter Banham is upset that his aunt is still missing and that he lost his fiancée. He goes to the attic room to reminisce about his crazy ex. He falls asleep and wakes to sounds under the floorboards. Something is trying to get out and grabs his arm when he reaches down underneath. He gets his arm away and puts a heavy chest over the offending floorboards. And for some reason, he goes back to sleep. He wakes to find a clawed, hairy hand in his throat, and he grabs a big knife and he cuts at it, screaming. The judge and house people arrive to see that he has cut off his own hand. The Jacobite judge takes control and summons the good doctor. Good luck with that. Doctor can't really help, but luckily he's got a book on demons and witchcraft. A medical text would be better, but this'll do too. They find a likely culprit for the demon at large. After reading, the judge reasons that the evil has to grow before it can be defeated. So he leaves the movie for a while and takes the demon book with him. Mark and Kathy are brother and sister, and they're heading home together. Mark was holding Angel's piece of bone, and now he has a pain in his side. His mom goes to the doctor to get medicine, and some local girls arrive and say they want to play with Mark. They have new games that Angel has taught them. He goes out with them, and he plays blind man's tag with the group, and while they're doing that, Angel kills him. And that pain on his side, well, they take whatever it's growing there. Mark's mom comes home to find him dead under the woodpile. Angel visits Reverend Fallowfield and tries to get him to join the demon sex cult. Somehow, and I will never know how, he refuses. This dude's the real hero of the movie. Angel gets her father to talk to the idiotic Squire Middleton to say that Reverend Fallowfield sexually assaulted her. Middletown is predictably convinced by this lie and has Fallowfield arrested. Angel gives Kathy the evil eye, and Kathy starts to get a pain in her side. We see her meet up with British Danny Bonaducci and a creepy young Mr. Bean when they find Kathy picking flowers in the woods. They half-friendly, half-menacingly bring Kathy deeper and deeper into the woods, where the demon sex cult assaults her, kills her, and cuts the hairy, gross skin that's growing on her side. This is a good time to spill what's going on. Basically, the demon Ralph dug up was a skeleton and needs to get his skin and muscles and body parts back. So he hexes people around him and gets help from Angel and the other the sex cultists to get people to get this gross skin growing on them. And it has to be cut off the surrogate and put on the demon skeleton body. And he's growing. We don't see really that much of this, and it's kind of hard to suss out that's what's going on. So when they take the skin from Kathy, there's a lot of chanting to the demon, Holy Behemoth, which was bear moth in my closed captioning, something like that. So Ralph finds Kathy's body dead and skinned in the woods, and he brings the body back to Squire Middleton. This cannot be the work of Reverend Fallowfield because he's in custody. It must be Angel Blake and her cult. Peter Banham rides off to London or wherever and tells the judge what's going on, and the judge comes back to the movie. The townspeople capture one of Angel's demon sex cultists, Margaret. She has that nasty skin on her. The doctor cuts the skin off and keeps it in a jar. Super gross. Margaret escapes, but is now on the outs with Angel and the group because she allowed their master's skin to be removed. The judge arrives back in town and gets a full debrief on the situation. He has studied the demon book and knows what to do to kill Bearmoth. He uses the piece of demon skin to give the dogs the scent, and they're off. They catch up to Margaret and force her to tell them where Angel and the cult are, at the old church ruins, where the master will take his form tonight. The judge and Squire Middleton raise a posse with torches and pitchforks and even a rake or two, and set off into the woods. Ralph realizes that he has the demon's skin on his leg, and we've also recently heard that the demon has been seen hopping around the woods on one leg, so we know what the plan is for Ralph, unless the demon can be killed. The cult grabs Ralph and takes him to the old church, and they're about to cut off Ralph's leg for the demon when we get the ridiculous monster reveal, and the judge attacks him with his holy sword and kills Bearmouth. The cult loses their mojo, and Ralph's leg clears up, and Angel Blake is killed. Woohoo! The end. All right, Chris, tell us a little bit about this crazy movie.
Thanks, Prof. As per usual, I'll get some trivia out of the way. Per Wikipedia, the film was originally envisioned by screenwriter Robin Wynne Simmons as an anthology of 3 loosely connected but separate stories set in the Victorian-era village at the request of Tagan British Film Productions. The disparate stories included one involving a woman locked in an attic by her abusive aunt, a group of children who uncover a monstrous carcass in a field, and a man who cuts off his own hand, which was possessed by a demon. Each of these stories was connected by an overarching narrative of a pastoral village being infiltrated by various evil forces. Wayne Simmons' screenplay was inspired in part by the Manson family and the Mary Bell child murders. He later elaborated, quote, "The central theme of the whole film was the stamping out of the old religions, not by Christianity, but by an aesthetic belief that all sorts of things must be blocked out of the mind. So the judge represents a dogged enlightenment, if you like, who is saying, quote, don't let these things lurk in dark corners, bring it out into the open and get rid of it. When it becomes a fully fledged cult, it will show itself," unquote. Now, Tagan executives ultimately opted to have Wayne Simmons transpose the story into an early 18th century farming community, having felt that the Victorian era had been exhausted already by various genre films. Wayne Simmons stated that he was specifically asked by the producers to include a number of elements from the studio's previous film, Witchfinder General, such as the quote Book of Witches, as well as the sequence in which Margaret is ducked in a body of water by the locals who suspect she is a witch. Quote, "This had to be included because it was so successful in Witchfinder General that they wanted to repeat it," he recalled. "I didn't mind that so much as it did show the incredible stupidity of the people at the time," unquote. Additionally, several other changes were mandated by Tagan, including a redraft of the ending, which originally had the judge enlisting a militia to murder the entire village to eradicate the cult. Tagan executives deemed this ending too bleak, and it was replaced with a finale in which the demon is defeated and the villagers are spared. Director Piers Haggard was hired to direct the project and worked with Wayne Simmons to retool a screenplay from its anthology format to a singular cohesive narrative. Now, summarizing the screenplay, Haggard commented back in 2003, "The all-powerful imaginative sequences of horror are Robert's invention. Nothing was taken away to his credit for him conceiving that sequence of experiences and images and the whole story. My writing contribution is entirely the area of the character or the character subtlety, trying to make family relationships resonate. Some of the non-action stuff is mine, like the kids wandering through the woods, and you're haunted by fears and anxieties and so on. That stuff is mostly mine, so that's my contribution to try to thicken the texture." By Haggard's account, the film's original working title was actually The Devil's Touch, which was subsequently changed to Satan's Skin. With respect to casting, Haggard says Linda Hayden had to be used because she was under contract with Tony Tesner. Tamara Ustinov, the daughter of actor Peter Ustinov, was cast in part because of her name. The role of the judge was originally offered to Peter Cushing, who declined it due to his wife's illness. Christopher Lee was also considered, but his fee was too high for the budget, so Patrick Winmark was cast. This film was Winmark's last English language film, and it was released 3 months just after his death. With the younger cast, Haggard dedicated 2 weeks prior to shoot and hold rehearsals. Now, with respect to the filming itself, the filming began April 14th, 1970, and had an initial budget of £75,000, which expanded to £82,000. And I'm not sure about the scale with it back then. The old kind of rule of thumb was a pound was sort of like worth $2, but that's well different by nowadays standards. The shoot lasted approximately 8 weeks and mainly took place in the small village of Bixbottom, Oxfordshire, located in Chiltern Hills. The ruined church that figures prominently is the old St. James Church in Bixbottom, which had been abandoned since 1875. Wow. Prior to the appearance in The Blood and Satan's Claw, the church had been used in the location in the film The Witches back in 1966. The scene in which the villagers hold a funeral for Mark Vespers was shot in the village of Hurley, with portions of the woodland sequences were filmed in the Waburg Nature Reserve and Black Park near Ivor Heath, Buckinghamshire. Additionally, some of the filming, of course, took place in Pinewood Film Studios. Several of the young cast members, particularly Hayden Ustinov and Richard Williams, recall that Haggard's direction was so concise that the shoot operated very, very smoothly. The film was shot by cinematographer Dick Bush. When devising the film's visual elements, Haggard was influenced by the work of Ingmar Bergman, particularly The Seventh Seal and The Virgin Spring. Haggard adapted a painterly style of the film, marked by low camera angles that cast actors on high landscapes and open skies. Anthony Ainley, who played the courier to Linda Hayden's character, attempted to seduce, once said in an interview when it came to the scene, quote, "When it came to doing the nude scene where Angel comes into the rectory at night and disrobes, this was done at least 3 times, and Linda was spot on with every take. She was a total professional with a refined scene of erotic, unusual for her age." I believe she was only 17 at the time. Yowza.
Yikes.
On the first day of filming, though, Linda Hayden cut her foot, and it cut her foot so badly that it had to be rushed to a local hospital for stitches. And she stated in an interview that due to being in costume and makeup for her devilish scene, some of the older people at the hospital thought she was either an angel or a devil that they had passed over. Patrick Waymark, as previously stated, played the judge. Sadly, didn't get to see this. He died shortly after the film was made, 3 months. Prof, let's pick it apart. And I'm really dying to hear your take on this. And I think you've got some spot on things because I cheated. I looked at some of your notes, but please expand on this. What is your general take and review of this movie?
Okay, well, first of all, this is my favorite folk horror movie. So this is definitely one of the kind of classic folk horror films from the 70s. There are a couple other competitions that other people sometimes say. Some people like The Wicker Man better than this. The musical numbers in The Wicker Man make it unwatchable for me. And The Witchfinder General is also often told as a kind of a favorite folk horror, but that's just mean. I just find that movie's not really a horror movie. It's just an awful people movie. So I find that hard to watch. So this one is my favorite folk horror. Another kind of one negative thing here. There's when Kathy her skin is taken, there is a sexual assault element that is unnecessarily included to that death. It goes on for a little bit too long, and it seems to be done for just purely voyeuristic purposes and is not cool at all. I'm not a prude, and I don't like, people to think I'm a prude. I don't object if it's part of the plot, a sexual assault like I spit on your grave or one eye or whatever. I realize that is done as prurient as well, but at least it serves the plot. In this case, there's no reason for the assault. They were going to kill her and take her skin, and that's fine, and they should have kept it to that. I was heartened to see an interview with Piers Haggard about making this movie, and he made the exact same point. So it makes me feel a little bit better about watching this movie, knowing that the director regrets some of the things that he put in it that I don't like at all. So as you mentioned, Chris, this movie was meant to be a trilogy. They didn't need to do too much to link them together into one story. However, it does mean that Patrick Waymark, who's the hero of this, at the beginning, he doesn't look like he's going to be a good guy, and he leaves the movie at the kind of beginning of Act 2 and doesn't come back until the end. It feels a little weird and disconnected, and it is. I think the monster reveal, the monster is kind of ridiculous. But then I think about this is an early 70s movie, a monster movie with a guy in a monster suit. He looks a little more like Bingo from the Banana Splits than any kind of thing that's going to horrify you. But any movie from the 70s with a man in a monster suit is going to be a little silly. So I don't really worry about that too much at all. So I'm critical of the plot. I'm critical of the content. I'm critical about the monster. Why do I love this horror movie? For me, this movie perfectly captures a horror vibe that I just love. So this movie does not have that hammer polish. This is a Tygon film. Ralph Gower's boots and pants are caked in mud as he's kind of plowing the field. His curly hair is flopping around in the wind. He looks a lot like Roger Daltrey in this. Fences that look like they were quickly made, just like they would be if these were real farms back in the early 1700s, with just whatever material they could scrounge. The houses are modest and kind of tight, close quarters. Very cozy, not these grand mansions from Hammer's movies. And even the wealthy people in this town, their clothing is modest. And all of these choices, combined with this kind of semi-medieval rural era, this folk horror era, the moody mist-filled cinematography, and this pretty and ominous music just gives me that horror movie vibe, that creepiness that I don't care. This could be in any movie. This is why I love watching Howling 2, Your Sister's a Werewolf. It's the same creepy horror vibe I love. I love Rosalind gives a creepy smile as she's being brought to the bedlam. She's just like, the poor girl's a victim. And then she gives this smile and you're like, yeah, she's got to get locked up. Linda Hayden is Angel Blake. I didn't realize she was 17 during this movie. So that, I got to think about that. She is sinister, seductive, often has like very heavy made up eyebrows. She was absolutely beautiful in this movie. She looked vicious, manipulative, and just a really good bad guy here. And I did want to mention something about the judge. We never get his full name. And he makes a quote at one point where it's late at night and he's sitting around with Peter and they're drinking and he's had a couple of drinks, says, he used to love Mistress Bounham when he was younger and before she was married. And he gives a toast, God save his Catholic Majesty, King James III in exile. So what does that mean? King James III, this is set in the early 1700s. King James III was the previous king, a Catholic king, the ex-king in exile. And ultimately, I think it's 1745 or so, there's what's called the Jacobite Rebellion to put him back on the throne. That fails. So this movie is set before the Jacobite Rebellion, where there were out in the countryside pro-James III sympathizers. What that tells me about this judge, for as stuffy and upright and follow by the rules as he shows himself to be, he's a rebel at heart. And that's why he's saying, it's not going to be witchcraft. It's not going to be witchcraft. But then he takes the witchcraft book and he studies it and he realizes that, yes, this is what's going on here. It's knowing a little bit about the history and the time period of what's going on. It really makes this movie, gives it an extra dimension of richness. Chris, what are some of your thoughts about The Blood on Satan's Claw?
Thanks, Prof. I have to thank you for suggesting this movie to cover on the podcast, because I have to confess I wasn't familiar with the movie nor had seen it before. And doing some research, I found some interesting little tidbits. Film journalist Brad Wiseman calls this film as an example of several British folk horror movies from the 1960s and 70s in which ancient demons, gods, other supernatural entities kind of crept into contemporary life. And there was another take on it by a guy by the name of Paul Newland, who was an author, and he wrote in a book called British Rural Landscapes of the Film, that this particular movie, The Blood on Satan's Claw, has also been interpreted as a, quote, 17th century set articulation on the, quote, slow and painful death and the counterculture movement of the time from the 1960s. He also commented that the film has a preoccupation with the countryside and its, quote, potentially subterranean landscape. And he notes that the British rural folk horror movies, such as this one, uncover that idiosyncratic nature of specific rural places in Britain, often at the same time acknowledging that their ways of life and the systems of the behavior and the ideas effectively stand and opposed to the modern stuff, the technology, the rationality, and the industrial and the post-industrial. I thought that was a great observation. Really, really good stuff there. Prof, this was a fantastic film, and we're going to pick it apart a little bit more with our own thoughts and introspections. But my gosh, thank you for pointing me to this. Now, for full disclosure, I didn't see this movie in its entirety, just in the one sitting. This is roughly 90 minutes, and I have to say, due to my time schedule this past week, I saw it in 3.5-hour chunks. I don't know if I necessarily lost anything with the heft and the weight. I don't think I did. But I just want to put this out there for anybody who's mildly interested in this film. It is available on Tubi and Pluto and Amazon Prime at the time of this recording. Prof, I have to turn it back to you when we take this apart. I'm really curious, what were some of the favorite moments that you had in particular with this film? Because I know you loved a lot of it, and I'm just wondering if you had any particular highlights.
Well, I love the scene with the kids passing the bag of body parts and skeleton pieces behind their backs during class so that Reverend Fallowfield doesn't find it. So it's really cool as they're, all the kids in the back row, right? They're in the back of the bus smoking cigarettes or whatever, but they're in the back row of the class, and it's a shot from behind them as you see their hands behind their back as they're passing the bag of bones from kid to kid. It's really inventive visually. I really like how that works. And then there's the other scene when Peter is up in the attic room and all the commotion is going on under the floorboards, and he puts his arm down to see what's going on, and it gets caught. And he's like, I'm stuck, I'm caught. Classic horror trope, him being stuck like that. The scene where Angel tries to seduce Reverend Fallowfield, that scene for me is very, even watching it on television back in the 70s, having it edited for television content, there's still something very, Linda Hayden is just so charismatic in that scene. Definitely worth checking out. There's another scene that I love where Mark's mother, when Mark is killed and he's in the woodshed underneath a whole bunch of wood, when that woman who really, she's a good actress in the rest of it. She's not really very emotive though in the rest of the movie. And as she's uncovering Mark's body under the pieces of wood, she's just crying, and it's almost like a very method acting moment where she just really embodies a mother who is finding the body of her son. It's very, very intense. Great acting moment there. And you mentioned about the cinematography where there's a lot of low angle shots and a lot of people up against the very, crisp sky. Anytime the music and the crows show up against the sky, that's one of my favorite parts of the movie. I cannot, underestimate or understate how much the music really works for me in this movie. How about you, Chris? What are some of your favorite movie moments?
Oh, Prof, just taking it at face value, it was so interesting to see a British Hammer horror film. We always associate Hammer with this type of thing, and this was really, really nice. Just some mild stuff, too. We have a guy in the cast named Ralph, and how interesting is that to see a fictional character named Ralph, and his last name isn't Cramden, and just to see that, wow, the name Ralph stretched back prior to that, and it's still a name that's still going on.
It's like the Tiffany problem.
Yes, indeed. Good catch. We keep circling back to it. Some of the shooting choices I thought were really, really bold, and I liked it. We had these upward angles, these downward angles, and the outdoor shots. And our point of view is just like we're looking at some scenes through some small tree branches, as if we're peeking in on something as a viewer, that we're watching it. And it's kind of taboo. We're almost like this third-party observer to watch some of the actions in some of these scenes. And I really thought that was a really bold choice and a very effective one. I thought it worked really, really well. And it's like, you'd have to think some directors or some other cinematographers will say, no, I don't want this shot obstructed in any way. But here in the foreground, I mean, we're looking at trees and we're looking at other things, and the action is in the background. And I thought, wow, this is really good. It almost makes it seem like we're spying on some of the cast and some of these scenes, and I thought it was really, really well done. Prof, we keep on circling back to Linda Hayden and her performance too. I love the evolution of her eyebrows throughout this whole thing, where they get more menacing as it goes on. Linda Hayden's eyes just have this sort of whimsy to them, and there's a little bit of mischievousness to them as well. And she's in total command of her performance. She's in total command of what she's doing, and I'm just reveling in every scene she's in. She's just eating it all up. And I thought this was very award worthy in some sense, because I thought she was outstanding in this movie. A lot was asked of her. She nailed it. And just how carefree she is in almost all of these scenes. And it's just a marvelous, marvelous performance in general. But the eyebrows I thought was really, really good. It just, when I read that she cut her foot and she freaked out people in the hospital, I thought, yeah, I have to think maybe part of her had some fun with that. I hope the injury wasn't too bad. And circling back to that, stepping back a little further, I like that there was not a soul. I mean, usually when I see British productions, we see the same group of characters once again in all the Hammer films. And that's okay. They all are so good, but I really liked that there wasn't anyone out of all these British actors. I didn't recognize anyone in the cast. And that said, I found no problems with anyone's acting performances from top to bottom, supporting cast to leading roles. This was great. There was a charm to this, and I don't want to say this looked amateurish in any way, but violence and nudity aside, and I don't mean this in a negative or pejorative way, some of these outdoor scenes, it sort of had a vibe that I was like looking at people doing these actions and doing these ceremonious things, and whether they be playing their quote unquote games or trolloping in the forest, this sort of had a vibe to an outdoor LARP almost. And I'm kind of like, I was kind of stepping in and eavesdropping on some of these things that were almost like a fantasy role play, if you will. And again, that comes off as negative, pejorative, and I certainly don't mean that, but there was just a whimsy to all these characters, and seeing them in their roles, it kind of reminded me of that. Blood on the Satan's Claw isn't a title that really rolls off the tongue, but I have to say, this is definitely worth a watch. I'm so glad we brought this to the table, and it was your choice, Prof, for doing that. So again, I'm tipping my cap and raising my glass to you. This was a great call. I really, really like this film, and I think if I saw it on subsequent viewings, there would probably be things I would catch on the second go around. And Prof, I put it to you, how many times have you seen this movie? And for this particular podcast, did you catch anything for your most recent viewing?
I think I was a little clear on the plan for kind of rebuilding the demon, like the body parts, taking the body parts off of people, and like Ralph's leg, how his leg was going to be the one that replaced the demon's leg, because the demon was seen with only one leg hopping around the forest. So I think that logic, it's not really clear what's happening, why all these people are being killed and their skin is weird. So I think I got the logic behind the demon's plan a little better. What did I see? I've seen this movie probably about 30 times, I would say, off and on. And that includes all the times I saw it as a kid on TV. There, you mentioned Linda Hayden's foot getting cut, and I wonder, do you remember the scene where Margaret gets caught in the bear trap or whatever?
Yes.
And Angel comes down to talk to her and says, "Oh, you got the master skin taken." She's barefoot in that scene, and she has to come down a kind of a side of a hill that's very rocky, lots of little rocks. And I wonder if she cut her foot during that scene, because I was not even knowing that she had cut her foot. I was looking at that like, ouch, that doesn't look good. I wouldn't do that to an actor. So you also mentioned about the amateurness, a little like the LARPing element of this, and I sometimes wonder if that's what attracts me to some of these. I don't want to say lower budget, because this movie didn't have a low budget, but some of these kind of lower end movies, particularly horror movies, that almost seem like you could make them yourself. Last week we did Phantasm, and or 2 weeks ago we did Phantasm, and then this week we're doing this movie. You have that element of this can be done by anybody who just loves horror. And I really like that. It's definitely foundational for me about why I love horror. Do you have any other comments about A Blood on
Prof,
Satan's
one other
Claw?
thing I was going to posit to you, and we talked about some of the unique cinematography and some of the choices that really, really worked well with respect to the angles and the way. And one of the things that I loved in particularly was shooting like kind of through the tree branches, if you will, and looking up on and on down a scene, and just the granted the scenery and the landscape sells itself, but as a cinematographer, you have to decide on, and the director, you have to decide on where you're going to shoot it from which angles. And I think so many choices were really, really spot on. One of the things I'm kind of rubbing my chin with and just thinking, overall, yes, this movie worked. But when we get to the conclusion of the film, we had a couple of freeze frames during the climax of the violent scenes where the Puritans are coming down. We don't get too many shots of the demon itself. Maybe, I think there were 2 tops, maybe 3, where we clearly see the demon, but that's it. But we never really had the freeze frame effect up until the end. And at first I liked it, then I thought about it and said, well, no, it should have been a continuous action. But no, I thought, then again, I circled back and I kind of contradicted myself a second time, thinking, yes, this really did work, and I should have stuck with my first thought. Prof, when we get to the climax, when we get to the eradication of the demon, we did get some freeze frames here. Did the freeze frames work for you? And do you think that was a subtle difference and a knowing difference that the director chose? And did the ending and stick the landing for you?
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. It's a little quirky. The end of the supposedly highlight of this movie, the peak of the action is kind of broken up a little bit. And I think that's a negative. I just, the only reason I think they may have done that is because when they did it at regular speed, the judge kind of stabs the demon with his sword and then kind of picks him up into the sky. I wonder if that looked kind of ridiculous done at regular speed, so they decided to do something else. The demon looked ridiculous enough, but maybe together that was a little too much. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, Prof, I like that. I love how you put that. Yes, I will stick by you, and I think looking back, I think you hit it on the head. I wasn't so harsh on the demon's appearances, maybe you were, considering what they had to work with. But you're very blunt and very very fair. But I think it was just fine with the way it is. For me, I like that I questioned myself, liking it, then disliking it, then circling back to liking it again, and just having that stay with me, because there were so many things that were so well done with this that I'm kind of leaning your way to thinking, yeah, that probably did look a little silly if we just did it without breaking it up. So that's why they did it. So yeah, Prof, thank you for adding that comment. That really put a smile on my face.
You betcha. You betcha. Well, thank you for checking out Frenzy Frides. Check out our other shows, The Professor Frenzy Show, where we cover indie comics, That Guy in That Show, where we look at great character actors, and our Twilight Zone episode review, where we review Twilight Zone episodes. Thank you for listening.
It's friends.